Okay, how's it going? What's new? Any job opportunities? Anyone got a new job? Internships? Who's due to graduate in May? What's the plan?
I'm going to grad school at Minnesota State in the health and sport exercise
Congrats. Exciting. What about over here? What's the plan? Nothing. Take time to figure it out. Who here plans on doing graduate school in the future? Who's doing psychology? Grad school. Alright. What's the plan? Yours is social work? That's
Maybe.
the plan? Okay, must have you. What do you plan on doing after grad school? Social work. Who's trying to do social work? Okay. Who's trying to do clinical psychology?
Does research count as clinical?
To some degree, it depends.
Okay.
Right?
I didn't know what umbrella you were under.
Yeah. They can't overlap. Organizational psychology. A lot of money in that. Consider that, right? You can sort of work as a consultant for major companies, Google, environment, colors, how colors affect employees, consumers, business psychologists. Right? Think of how we're being influenced by everything in terms of shapes, colors, numbers being used, right? Microsoft uses the light blue for a reason. It calms you, relax you. The color red excites you. It also makes you very tired because it drains your energy. Right? So a lot of psychology about most things. So we have to think about perception as a key driver. All right, psychology is, in my opinion, the greatest field because it's the field that deals with your internal universe. And your internal universe is probably the only one that really matters. Right? Understand that internal universe, more likely to understand other people because they are both the same species as you. All right, moving along. We are in sexuality during childhood and adolescence. So we'll kind of look at some of the processes on building sexual personalities as you develop through birth, through adolescence. The issues that can occur along the way, disruptions, interruptions, some of the social forces that drive us to have different perspectives on sexuality during these phases, such as things that derive shame, guilt about your own body, how you use it, and things of that nature. But before we get into kind of all of that, let's think of a Freudian mindset. Right? You know, Freud, unavoidable. Freud needs a lot of contribution. He really did lay the framework for most of all of psychology, him and Young and Allen, I would say for the most part. Although Freud may have been a little bit extreme in some of his deductions of human psyche, he did come up with a platform on how we should overall think about the systems at play here. One is that we are psychosexual beings starting from birth, and that babies still have a libido, right? A sex drive, in order to form a personality. That is critical to forming who you are going to be ultimately, and how you are going to behave later on throughout life. Beyond that, we have the stages. Right? So Freud's theories of psychosexual development deals with predominantly 5 stages. They kind of added the last one, but it was 4 originally. So we think of, first one is oral. So we say, well, what does oral mean? Oral phase of development. You're like, well, at the beginning of life, we have to suckle. What body part are you using to do that? Using your mouth. At the beginning of life, as part of your own survival, right? Natural instincts. You will use your mouth to cry. Crying is a form of communication, a distress signal that something needs to happen. A baby may clamp down, right? Biting. So in essence, we say at the earliest stages, particularly from 0 to like 2 years, we're thinking babies need binkies, pacifiers, in order to calm them and relax them, to satisfy them, to give them pleasure of some sort. Right? So that's where the sort of zone of pleasure is at the mouth at this stage. So we think, what could go horribly wrong at this stage? Well, either mom or dad, or whoever's the caretaker, say, you know what, baby's crying for the binky. I'm gonna wait. I'm too busy, stressed out, I'm lazy, overworked. I will let the baby cry. Then I'll give it some binky. I'll give it some time. Or a parent say, oh my gosh, baby's crying, let's immediately go on the binky. Okay? Overemphasizing the need to satisfy in the shortest amount of time here. Now we understand balance is usually the key to life or the key to nature in some ways. So overemphasis on any spectrum is usually not a good thing. Right? So Freud would sort of theorize and hypothesize that any disruption throughout this phase, the oral phase, that is not within balance, will lend to some lifelong issues of compulsions, fixations, weaponizations of the mouth. Right? According to Freud's theories, he would say you would have an oral issue. What could an oral issue do? If I think they get an oral issue at this stage, you might have a high degree of propensity to use your mouth as a weapon, or to use your mouth as a area of pleasure. So Freud would maybe deduce that one who engages in oral sex, right, has some sort of propensity for it. He would theorize that there was a disruption or interruption during this stage of development. Freud may theorize that people who weaponize the mouth, gossipers, talkers, slanderers, that something disrupted a healthy sense of development at this stage. Freud would theorize that those who smoke have a propensity to satisfy through the mouth or any sort of substance which is compulsory to use in the mouth, including eating. Absorb it in the mouth, eating. He would say something happened along the way. Something was disrupted during this phase. Now we're using the mouth, especially. Now we're using the mouth for gratification, instant gratification, compulsory gratification. The mouth is the source of fixation or compulsion. All right, moving along. We say, well, what's past the oral phase? Next would be what for children? Anal, right? Okay, so Freud would say, hey, you know what? Now we've gotten you through, you're off the binky, right? You're done with breast milk, breastfeeding. still need bottles for milk and stuff like that. And now you're at a new phase where we need to focus on you doing something that's universal for all human beings, which is yearning indefinitely, right? To be able to do this in a healthy, proper manner. So the anal phase. When we say with the anal phase, we're looking at 15 months to about like 3 years old. Right? Maybe slightly over 3, I would say now. Potty training. So with the anal phase, we're looking at, well, is the caregiver or the instructor who's teaching the child how to properly use the bathroom, how to do it in a timely manner. Timely is key, is what is timely. We say, well, of great urgency or to not a great urgency, right? Or somewhere in between. Freud would say, hey, a parent who overemphasizes the urgency to do it correctly, right? To run to the restroom, right? Make sure that no mess is being happening. Freud would say, well, there's a tendency to cause compulsions to be very strict. Right? And once again, we say psychosexual, we say development of personality as an adult due to these stages. So Freud would theorize that there's an association or relationship where one whose parents have overemphasized the need to go run to the bathroom and do it in a proper way, in a strict way, would develop some sort of compulsion for order. Right? What we may call type A personality or anal compulsive. That person is very anal. It has to be a certain way. Right? Everything has to be very strict. So Freud would deduce that something happened. Usually there was an overemphasis or a de-emphasis. There wasn't a healthy transition. There wasn't a healthy instruction from the parents in terms of guidance, learning how to use central functions of identification and urination. Right? So on the flip side of that, a de-emphasis, Freud would sort of deduce that, hey, someone could be anal expulsive. That their parents or caregivers didn't really hone in on the emphasis on using the restroom in a proper way, right? In a timely manner. Thus, personality would be related to a mess. They created a mess. A mess how? Freud would say, well, things related to their lives as an adult would most likely be a mess. It would be disorderly. It would be messy. You look at their room would be messy. Their lives would be messy. Everything appears to be a mess. Or a lack of discipline. Freud would even possibly relate anal expulsive sort of personalities to criminals. He would say that you are against the authority that your parents were instructed you about using basic functions such as using the bathroom. He said, thus you would probably do the same thing for systems and structures in the outside world, and you would be sort of contrarian to outside forces. All right, beyond that, so we do oral, then we got anal, what do we got next? Phallic, all right? Say now we're trying to pay attention to the genitals. We say that happens typically after 3 years of age, goes up to about 6. Right? So it typically goes up to right before you're about to start elementary school or right after elementary school. Right? You start to notice that there's a difference in the sexes. Yes, beforehand you did possibly say mom and dad. Right? You did probably describe mom and dad, but you had no real psychological explanation of the difference between mom and dad. At this stage in the phallic, you start to notice that there is a difference in the sexes, including your own. You may have a sister or a brother and say, interesting, their sexual reproductive organs, especially if they take baths together, right, or are naked together in some way, theirs are different or are similar. And with the fixation on the genitals, if there's too much of a fixation and allowed by the parents, caretakers, the instructors, right, the discipline, if there's being too much activity being placed on the genitals, such as touching and playing, and overemphasis of it, for it would theorize that there would be an issue with the genitals later on in life. Once again, the genitals would be a tool of communication to the outside world, some sort of major area of expression, right? Personality expression of who you are as a person. For it theorized too, with the acknowledgement of the difference of the sexes, that the children at this age might notice the power structures and dynamics in the difference of the sexes. You may notice that maybe dad potentially has a little bit more authority in some way. They may notice that mom is a little bit more nurturing, caring, loving. They may notice that the actual bond or relationship they have with each parent is different. Maybe mom is more present, way more loving than dad. So there's a difference of a relationship between mom and dad. Maybe dad is more loving. Maybe mom is primary caregiver, but dad may be more servicing that emotional need. Moves out of the rhesus monkeys. Human beings love emotional need more than material supply. So even though mom supplied the breast milk and do all the stuff, dad may supply satisfaction of emotional needs. With that being said, personas may develop of wanting to be like the parents. Right? Want to be more. So even for the opposite sex. Or to theorize that there could be, we call it an Oedipus complex, right? Which is what? Who remembers Oedipus complex?
Of course, classic. It's that theory that the boys want to be with their mother sexually or like romantically. It's based off of the Greek Oedipus where he ends up marrying his mom.
Yeah. Right, so that would typically go with a son, a boy, gravitating towards his mother in a sexual way because it tends to be the parent that services the emotional need to a high degree, usually in an overemphasis way. So once again, we say there's a disruption, an unhealthy sort of activities happening. Right? Healthy would be not viewing mom in such a way. Right? So maybe mom is a bit overbearing, and that has caused the young man to maybe gravitate to thinking those things. On the opposite of that, Freud theorized about the electro complex, which is the opposite, right? Of more the female daughter wanting to be more like the man, right? The dad. And seeing the amount of power and sway that the dad holds in the family dynamic. And thus recognizing that the dad, the male, has a penis, may sort of come to some sort of production of penis envy. Envy of not having the genitalia representative of the person that you want to become or become like. So, right? Controversial theories. Freud is all full of controversy, but if you really think the basis of a lot of things he said, it does make sense to some degree, right? To some degree. He gives us a platform to start on. All right, beyond that, we have what phase? Who remembers? Well, late. latent phase, right? So Freud theorized basically once you start elementary school, first grade, 6 years old, that typically your psychosexual drive turns off. Take a break. Right? There's no more emphasis on anus, penis, mouth. Right? Think of these what we call erogenous zones, right? Areas where there's great pleasure, right? There's felt sensual pleasure, sexual pleasure. Tends to be like a switch that's turned off up until puberty, right? Which is interesting. I often wonder if grade school and high school is sort of divided between those stages. Grade school is really supposed to be the elementary school is supposed to be like your latent phase. You're not thinking about all that stuff, and then as you develop puberty, you should transition. I don't know with that. Yes, in your latent phase, between, say, first grade and puberty, typically you are not focused on libido, psychosexual drives. Now, Freud says this is all natural. Only we give it the shame and guilt through perception. Right? We give it the shame and guilt of thinking we shouldn't have erogenous zones. But nature has given us these areas with dense neurons and circuitries, right? Pleasure ourselves. Right? We have social structures created to tell us what is normal, abnormal, all to be about. Just some way to think about it, right? Keep it open mind. Beyond that, we have genital phase. So basically, beyond the latent phase, after you develop through puberty, Freud hypothesizes basically as adults, we are sexual beings. But typically, our highest form of communication is through sex. That's Freud's theory. Your highest form of expression as an adult is through your sexual behavior. Depending on how you view it, right? Marriage, family, promiscuous, all the above. But that develops your personality, who you are as an individual. All right, so let's get through it. All right, any questions about Freud? Who disagrees with Freud? Who disagrees with those sort of theories, ideas? Is there any disagreement? Tell me what part you disagree about.
I think the oral stage makes sense because when you're at that age, that's like the way you explore the world. Everything immediately goes into the baby's mouth. And I think that's part of just you're developing your sense organs and you're still working on vision and stuff throughout the years. So that the way it then ties later throughout life, I kind of question a little bit. But again, like the idea of like these are these big physical zones of the body where things are happening. Like yeah, you go through the oral phase of discovering the world, and you're going through the anal phase. Like hey, I'm trying to learn how to control my own bodily functions. Who knows what happens during the other ones? Because yes, children are weird and they discover their own bodies. But then, yeah, especially like the Oedipus complex, I don't even think the female one at all. It makes more sense to me for just being like a jealousy thing of like, oh, I'm a boy. You do realize like opposite gender thing. You go, okay, I'm a boy. Dad's a boy. I want all of mom's attention. I don't want dad. And you can get some kind of like jealousy thing with the other parent. And I would just see it as going the opposite way of I'm a girl, mom's a girl. I want dad's love and attention. And mom's giving me just like jealousy. It's like that makes more sense for me. I think yeah, it makes sense.
Freud definitely can be argued. Anyone else? Issues with Freud's or agreements?
My beef with Freud is that People read his stuff and then take it immediately as like, oh yes, of course, that has to be it, you know. And he's this grandfather of psychosexual psychology, and I think the only contribution that his theories, and he's emphasized theories and ideas, things that are not contested, not like there's nothing to really support it other than, oh, do these make sense when I say them? I think the only thing that you really get from them is the idea that things that happen in our childhood and in our past have an influence on us on the present. And I think it's less of an emphasis on these developmental stages, and it's more of a reflection of the things of the way that the parents treat the children, and how a lot of the parents' behaviors are going to be passed on to the child. And that's the part that I do agree with. And then the beef I have is that, again, it's just ideas. He's like he's the philosopher of psychology, and everybody thinks that he's so smart, but he doesn't have any like juice to back it up. People just think that, well, it's such a crazy idea and it makes sense to me. It's like, well, you don't deal with science that way.
Good arguments, right? All right, so say for Freud, yeah, Freud tends to be philosophical, right? Freud was not quote unquote a psychologist, right? Freud was essentially a medical doctor, right? Essentially, Freud really was like an MD of some sort. So Freud thought that he can cure human beings, cure an illness, a mental illness, right? And in which case, well, now we kind of know that, hey, that's ideological too, Freud. Like, you can't cure anybody. What we can do is manage and cope things throughout life, because life is perpetual, right? New things happen, new issues, new problems, new anxieties, new stressors. We can't just turn on and turn off certain things and put in the mind that easily. In Freud's defense,
ooh, Freud apologist in here.
well, you know, in Freud's defense, he probably didn't have the tools. The tools weren't created, the methodologies, the strategies, the things that we know now. So we say now, later on, we do have the luxury of building the knowledge, the systems, processes, instrumentations, things of trying to understand it. But I think as in all things, usually all fields derive from some sort of philosophical aspect, which is, you know, questioning, right? Why cause and effect, right? So I say Freud is cause and effect, big idea, observant maybe of this mammalian life. Maybe he was, you know, looking at other things and kind of relate them to human beings, how we all go through these changes. But yes, deeply flawed in a modern aspect. So yeah, a lot of people disagree with him. Even Adler and Jung were his buddies at one point, right? As we understand, there's a lot more to it. Jung thinks that we forgot the spiritual aspect, right? We have symbolisms, interpretations, right? Things that are symbolic to us, that have extreme meaning, that guide and shape our behavior. Religion, God, right? Other ideologies, values, culture, right? All sorts of things that can affect us along the way. All right, let's continue. But no, very good. I like the way that you took Freud down. You wrestled into it. All right, infant sexuality. All right, so there's a capacity for infants to be sexual at birth, right? You say there's a sexual response, which means there are touching of the genitals as some sort of means of deriving pleasure, the sense of pleasure. 2, sexual behavior is a normal part of development. It's normal to have sexual behavior because you, in essence, are here to procreate outside of the social structures and all the phenomenal ideologies. You, as a sentient being, we would all stop procreating. These species no longer exist. Right? So it's normal for us to have sexual behavior as part of our development. It's a part of our body. Your reproductive organs are part of you. Your genitalia are part of you. Only in society have we given sort of closed traditions, ways of doing things to try to suppress that natural part of us. If it's engaged in self-pleasuring activity, right? Unable to differentiate sexual from sensual pleasure. So at this stage, maybe it's not being viewed as a sexual pleasure. So maybe you say there's no consciousness of really sexuality, but we have to relate it to sexuality because it involves genitalia. But maybe in a conscious mind, it's not sexual or sensual. I say, hey, touching this particular part of my body for some reason gives me great sensual pleasure from the senses. It feels good to the touch, feels good to the mind, feels good to sensory organs to some degree. Limited research. Well, so we don't have a ton of research studying childhood sexuality. It could be probably very obvious, right? Be uncomfortable for a lot of parents how their children participate in research dealing with sexuality, especially small children, adolescents. Right? But we have some common behaviors at varying ages. 2 to 3 years old, masturbation